So our next speaker is Joanne Michael, KM6BWB, and she organized a cross-country balloon race here this spring with balloons being launched from, I believe, California and Oregon. And then I think a number made it clear to the Atlantic, if I remember right. So Joanne's going to tell us all about this, and it's found a great way to get kids engaged in STEM and high altitude ballooning. So go ahead, Joanne.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen. Give me just a moment. While I'm doing this, if you guys could help me out by putting in the chat box the state that you live in, just then that way I can help anybody that I can help. If I'm close by people and things like that. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. We will be viewing a bit of a YouTube link. So I'm going to put that in the chat box. I also have it at the bottom of the screen. It's a queued up part from a 50-minute video. So it's just a lot easier to do it like that. So I just put it into the chat box for the YouTube link. It's going to be about halfway through the presentation or so. So, yes, should we get going then? Come on, there we go. So tell you a little bit about myself. I am a K-5 hands-on science teacher and a curriculum coach. I taught 2 years in middle school, but I spent the past 13 years teaching K-5. So my basic goal is that I find out what the classroom teachers are teaching, and then I create a hands-on component. So I do everything from teaching kindergartners that an ice cube melts to dissecting animals and everything in between. I'm a general class ham radio operator. Got my technical license in 2016, my general class in 2017. I keep on trying to decide if I want to go for my extra or not. And maybe after all day today, that may convince me. I am a balloonatic. I've done 3 HABs, 9 MABs. I call MABs mid-altitude balloons, simply because they're not high altitude, and it was getting confusing to my colleagues. So I'm launching my 10th tomorrow, which is KM6BWB-10, and I'm actually launching my next high altitude in about 2 hours, 3 hours, which is why I wasn't here this morning for the earlier sessions, because we're filling up our payload. And so, sorry. Yeah, so if you want to track us, it's going to be in about 3 hours, KM6BWB-11. I got into radio from doing an ARIS contact, which is amateur radio on the International Space Station. Did that September of 2017. Loved the experience, loved ham radio, loved everything about it. So I'm now on the education committee as an educational ambassador. So my job is to work with other schools that are doing a contact and help them with the educational components, coming up with the questions, things like that. I'm also a mom. I'm a wife. I have a 6-year-old little boy that he has been doing the launches with me since he was 2. So he could explain to his preschool students how a balloon goes up in the air and why it pops and why you need a parachute. And it's fun. So it's a full family affair. So the virus that shut down education, obviously this is why we're doing it here. Our last day of in-person education in California was Friday, March 13th. In my district, we found out about, I think it was 8 a.m. on March 13th that we weren't going to be coming back. So that was a fun day. I had already been launching some mid-altitude PICO transmitters over the past couple of years, but decided I would do one on April 3rd as I had planned, just to give my students something new. The teachers were fried already at that point. I was tired, but ballooning is awesome. The kids loved it. It was great and exciting. And while I was out there, I realized that this is something that all students could do. This is something that all elementary school students could do from home. They could track it. APRS is free. It's easily accessible. As long as you have Google Maps, you can track it, and you have the call sign. And then you could just have fun. You could go. So my students knew that I can do this. They thought it was great, but I was thinking maybe there were some balloonists on the West Coast and we could race to the East Coast. But most of the balloonists I know are high altitude balloonists, not ones that do the pico ballooning. And so I didn't know if anyone would do it. I didn't mind doing it myself, but you know, competition is always a fun thing. So I was working with Frank Bauer, K3HDO. He's the ARIS chair, the AMSAT vice president. We were honestly talking about something else. He said, so you have any plans this, you know, during this summer? And I said, yeah. And I was thinking about doing this Pico race. But, you know, I'm not sure. I've got these lessons that I'd like to do with the students. Let's see what's going on. And he loved it. So he said, you know, why don't you put it on the website? We'll give a page for you so educators can access it, make it free. Hey, Dan. Beta. So next step was to find race participants. So again, I didn't mind doing it by myself if I had to, but so I'm friends on social media with a man named Ted Tagami, who's KK6UUQ, who lives near San Francisco, Berkeley area. So I asked him privately if you'd be interested in doing a balloon race, because I didn't want to put him on the spot in front of social media and saying, I challenge you. And he goes, no, I'm busy. And that would be embarrassing. So asked him offline and he agreed. So then I publicly challenged him to the race. And then Liam Kennedy, who is KN6EQU from Pasadena. He's also the founder, creator of ISS Above. He had recently earned his license. He wanted to catch on. Thought that'd be great. And that was back in April, maybe May. And then literally the weekend before the race, we got some new people. We have Trevor McDuff, who at the time didn't have a radio license. He wanted to, but he hadn't had it yet. So it's newly minted now, KS1 LAS. And his good friend, Steve Potter, who is K7HAK. They're out of Pasco, Washington, which is about central Washington, a little southeast. They heard about the race, they jumped in, so we actually had a race. So in this slightly fuzzy map, you can see where everybody's located. So if you don't know Southern California geography, Pasadena, and I launched from Torrance, which is right by LAX. Pasadena and Torrance are about 30 miles away from each other. So originally I was thinking, you know, that's not going to work because they're so close to each other, and then realized they're so close to each other. Are they going to be tracking each other at the same time? Are they going to stay 30 miles apart the entire time? Are they going to hit two totally different jet streams? I'm not sure. And yes, I did have some purists that were saying, if you're taking a look at where the locations are, the KK6UUQ is further south. That's a disadvantage. They need to start first. And you know, we're not going into extreme technicalities. We just thought it would be a fun race for the kids. The goal was the East Coast timeline. It wasn't a state. It wasn't anything like that. It was once you hit the East Coast time zone, you have won the race. So my job, like my passion is writing curriculum, setting up lessons, setting up units. I have a master's degree in science curriculum instruction from the University of Texas at Arlington. So I was excited to write the lessons. So there's gonna be a lot of text coming in. So among others, I set up graphs to chart the altitude per day for the students, have them chart the speed, chart the temperature, and I also set up all of the graphs that you could physically place them on top of each other. So you could chart the altitude and the temperature at the exact same time and see if you could find correlations. Had the maps both labeled and non-labeled for the US and for the world, just because you never know. A balloon may go past the United States. Articles explaining what APRS is, because as much as I hate to admit it, the majority of teachers have no clue what APRS is. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't really know what the jet stream is. They understand that when I go in an airplane, it's faster to go to the East Coast than the West Coast, and it's bumpy going backwards, and that's just about it. And so I found some articles and edited them, had a breakdown of how to use APRS to track a balloon. So one of my goals in doing this was providing a platform for any student from kindergarten through seniors in high school and above. Obviously, not everything is going to be appropriate for every single grade level, but even my kindergartners, my kindergarten son could draw in the map. He could color in the state that the balloon was going over. And then for my older students, they can graph the altitude maybe by the 100 a foot, or by every 1,000 foot. You could get into even more nuanced if you really wanted it to. If you want to do this, I still have all of the lessons up. Don't plan on taking them down. It's on the aris.org website, and I'll put that up again at the end. So the ground rules, because this is a race, you have to have rules in order to, and honestly, the rules weren't even necessarily for the participants, but more for our students who are tracking it, because I wanted to make sure that it was as easy for them to do this as possible. Because obviously I couldn't train the teachers ahead of time. A lot of them were just going in completely blind. So rule number 1 was that the balloons had to be 36-inch Mylar. They had to be filled with helium. So a lot of the reason why I did this was because that is economically the best way to do it. Yes, you can obviously use hydrogen. It's rather difficult for elementary school teachers to find hydrogen. So yes, it does work, but I'm just not going there. Yeah, it's very expensive, it's relatively dangerous, it's hard to get a hold of. For the same reason, I didn't want to use the SBS 13s because, again, they're expensive and they're not as easily accessible. They're a little bit harder to work with. I wanted to keep the only variable in the race to be the location, if at all possible. My next one was that we were going to do as close to a simultaneous launch as possible at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, and just crossing fingers that we weren't going to have any weather variables, because obviously we have 3 different areas, especially out in San Francisco, Berkeley area. They have a lot of cloud cover early in the morning, so we were worried about that, but we were going to give it a shot. Again, Aris sort of stepped in and found Steve Rise, who is KB1 VYD in Rhode Island, and he is just an amazing tech guy. So he volunteered to coordinate a live stream of our launches doing a combination of Zoom and YouTube. So he's got this amazing truck that I guess it was an old news truck that he bought and sort of converted into his personal traveling Radio Shack. And so we all called into Zoom, and so he had APRS on one screen, he had all of us on the other screen, and he was a moderator, and it was awesome. And we'll be showing that to you in a minute if you didn't get a chance to see it. Our rule, which isn't really a rule, Bill Brown, again, I think you may have heard of him once or twice. He was in the chat box on YouTube, so he was able to answer questions in real time. We were all on the phone with him earlier, just in case. And it was great because obviously those of us who were launching were a little bit preoccupied. And so some of the teachers were asking questions, or, has it gone yet? Or why are you using helium? Hydrogen is better, and things like that. And so he could answer those questions. We also had Frank Bauer was also on the line, so he was able to explain things about why are you hearing these random squelch noises, which sounded like a lot of static. So we did launch at 8:30 Pacific time. So this is where you can go onto your link. Sorry, I've got a puppy on the screen. So if you go onto the actual launch, or onto that link, I'll put it on here. It's going to load. There we go. So I'll pause that. Just, I don't know how well you can see this, but from right here, so we have Frank Bauer. This is Ted Tagami, the person who's launching out of Berkeley. This is Liam Kennedy launching out of Pasadena. There we go. This was out of Pasco, Washington. Or, no, sorry, this was also from, sorry, this was Tony. Here, I'll pause that. So Tony and Ted work together as part of Magnitude IO, which is another high altitude ballooning STEM organization. So Tony was viewing out of his office. Ted was launching. So Ted was launching out of Berkeley, San Francisco. Liam Kennedy was launching out of Pasadena. I'm over here launching out of Torrance, so LAX. And Trevor and Steve were launching out of Pasco, Washington. Frank Bauer is the ARIS Chair VP of AMSAT. So he was also just helping log. And again, Bill Brown was in the chat box. So as we go, see, so we all introduced ourselves. We were explaining what was going on with everybody. Again, most of my students, or most of the people who are watching, had never launched a high altitude balloon. And to be perfectly honest, Trevor and Steve right here, this was, I think, their second launch ever. This was Liam Kennedy's second launch. And so they were feeling the pressure a little bit. You can also see that we were using, so we had our masks on, we were using social distancing. So we went through, and again, this was awesome by Steve. So I'll let you guys watch the launch. So you can see once we got all of the balloons out of view, and I'll stop this one here. If you really want to watch it, it's about 4 hours long, which, you know, you might be a little bored. But what Steve did was we stayed on the Zoom call for another probably 10 minutes. And then Steve was amazing, and he changed it over to track it on APRS. And so then that way, people who weren't able to watch it in real time were able to go onto the YouTube link, and they could actually track all 4 balloons through YouTube if they weren't comfortable doing it on APRS or anything like that. So, sorry, trying to get back. There we go. So then what happened? So all the balloons headed north, which was a little strange because normally they travel more due east, but of course you're never going to have what you expect when you are tracking nationally. One thing that Liam Kennedy decided to do, which he didn't tell us about ahead of time, was that he used party time gas, which is the gas that you can buy from Target or Walmart in the pretty little pink tubs, because he couldn't get access to 100% helium. He decided not to tell us this until we launched, but it ended up being phenomenal because we now had 2 balloons that were launched in about the same area, but one of them had 100% helium, one of them had 80% helium. Is the 80% helium, 20% air going to make a difference? And we honestly, I didn't know. Bill Brown had said that it would be a little bit lower altitude, but it would still go. And so we'll just, we'll see what happens. So we, since we launched at 8:30 Pacific time, and we stayed essentially in the Pacific time zone because they went north as opposed to east, we were able to track them for a long time that first day, which was lovely. Normally when we launch them, obviously as they go across the country, we lose hours and hours of daylight. So the rest of the story. So the next morning, KM6BWB-9, which was my balloon, was stationary near Nevada. The KK6UUQ-8 was quiet near the Oregon-California border. K7HAK-11 had just awoken, but it was up near Saskatchewan. KN6EQU, which was the Pasadena balloon, woke up in North Dakota and it was hauling. It was moving real fast. And it also, again, crossed over some time zones. So it had been moving for a couple hours before we got up and saw what was happening. So we went through and like, okay, well, that's sort of interesting, but we want to know what's going on. Why did we have the two stationary balloons in Nevada? The one in Saskatchewan kind of makes sense because there's not a lot of repeaters up there. It's not a lot of, but we'll see what happens. So who won? Turns out the KK6UUQ decided to pull kind of a sneak attack. We're not quite sure what happened, but it crossed the country without sending out a packet. So we don't know if it, if there was a problem with the sensors. We don't know what happened. KN6EQU, so the Pasadena ended up winning the race. It crossed into the time zone in Canada. We never received another packet from Torrance. We only received one more packet from Pasco. So from this map, and normally I have to explain what's the difference between the red and the pink, and I don't have to do that with you guys, which is kind of nice. So we honestly don't know what happened, that it just crossed the entire country. This was an error on my part that I was off with my time zones, that when it was in Canada, that's at a different location. So, and of course we were so excited that I forgot to do screenshots. So just when you thought it was over, so Pasadena's balloon had a leak, like they do, came to the ground in Nova Scotia. But again, Bill Brown, Ted Tagami, all of the ham radio operators in this intimate network contacted a radio club in Nova Scotia. And they went out and said, hey, it's actually pretty close to us. We can go get that. And so they went out, and apparently there were bears in the area. And so they had to be tracking and checking for the bears to make sure the bears weren't nearby. And so then one of the Canadian stations picked it up. And so then they thought that was really cool. And so they did this big old article and were interviewed by the news. And so it turned into this international, exciting, not incident, but again, it was great for the students. And I love this picture. This one made it, I think that was one of the main pictures in the press is, a ham radio operator hanging off of a tree and pulling the shreds of a balloon. So the rest of our ballooning team got together. We're sending money for them to redo or to relaunch their balloon, probably in the school year. And so now it's turning into we're going to try to make it kind of a relay race to go around the world. We'll see what happens now. So the metrics, because metrics are interesting. So the ARIS website, where the lessons are located, it normally has about 400 to 500 unique hits in a day. So the day before the launch, which was a Sunday, there were 25,832 unique hits. So that many different computers / everything was on that website on a Sunday. Total of 30,000 total hits to the webpage. So a lot of times that's teachers that log on and then they go on a couple hours later. So that would just be a different hit. The YouTube video had just under 900 views since being published. And we just now added, good 40 views in the past 10 minutes. So that's kind of fun. We had hundreds of teachers around the world tracked and led their students into the world of amateur radio, into ballooning, understanding of meteorology, the jet stream, chemistry, geography. I thought it was really fun, just the fact that we went into Canada. And I had emails from some people around the United States that said, my students picked a balloon and they were tracking it, and then every night they would study where it went. So they learned about different provinces and different states. And one of the guys in my radio club, and I don't know why, he was looking up and he said, you know, you do know that you're trending in Denmark. I'm trending what? And we don't know. The only thing I can think of is because we did have a little write-up in ARRL magazine, and I think maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, so for a while we were trending in Denmark, which was just hilarious. My students absolutely loved it. So future plans, again, because this went fantastic. It was really fun. It was big on social media. We were all sort of supplying each other, cheering each other on, and people were claiming to make bets on different balloons and things like that. But one of the biggest things that we heard was, I'm in. I want to do this. When's the next one? I'll get my radio license. You said it's not that hard. Well, okay. So again, this was when we were thinking that we might be going back at least somewhat in person in the fall for education. And right now, depending on the states, I'll just leave it at that. So the thing that we love about this is you don't have to be in person to do these kinds of launches, these kind of races. So we have another race in the works for October 2020. Because we're getting a lot of different people that are excited about doing this. We have different launch dates depending on the gas and the goal. So for these educators that have never done it before, if they want to go just all helium, awesome. Hydrogen, fantastic. If we have the party time balloonists, so the combination gas, and then ones for around the world. Because there are some that they're going, this is great, but if I'm buying a sky tracker, I want it to go long distance, and we'll give them a chance. Right now, I'm working with another educator on a NASA grant to get ballooning into the classroom. I'm actually sitting in her living room right now, showing how it can be done on a budget, showing the education behind it. And so that is part of the reason why we're launching a high altitude in a couple hours, because we're filming the launch and recovery as part of our grant proposal to show how it can be done. So if you're bored, you want to track a balloon while you're listening, you're welcome to do that. We will be launching a mid-altitude Pico balloon, KM6 BWB-10, as well as our HAB today. At one point, we were going to flip those two, so I would have two different call signs in the air at the same time, but my brain can't handle that. So we flipped it around. So here's my contact information. So down at the bottom is my website. It's still very much a work in progress, but right now I have some lessons, some articles, things like that. My contact information. Let me get to my chat box. I apologize if you were firing questions at me and I wasn't responding. I promise I'm normally better than that. Sorry, I'm moving things around to try to get to my chat. Does anybody have any oh, there we go. There we go to the chat. What APRS track we'll be using for the race? I'm going to be using Bill Brown Sky Trackers. So the solar panel, APRS. So if I buy a $60 tank of helium from Amazon that's marketed for party balloons, yes, it is almost definitely going to be what we call the party gas, the 80-20 mix. So that was one of the frustrating things about the party time gas, is that they don't tell you that it's not 100% gas, that it's not 100% helium. That's just, they don't. And I looked it up on the website and I was trying everywhere to see if I could find out what the percentage was. Couldn't find it. I just knew it wasn't 100%, because if you look at the directions on the party time balloons, they say that it will hold a helium, hold a balloon up for about 5 to 6 hours. And mind you, that's, a random latex balloon. But it doesn't say what the percentage is, what technically the gas is. You're assuming the other gas is just air, but you don't know. But again, for those educators that maybe don't have access to 100% helium, because that's also really expensive. You know, not every grocery store is happy to fill a random 36-inch Mylar balloon with exactly 16 cubic feet of gas and things like that. It's very, very difficult. So, but it still can work. And again, we're using 100% helium, and the balloon that made it across the United States first was the one used in the party time. And so while that was slightly frustrating, it was fantastic. It was a great opportunity for the students because they saw that it could work. I will say one of my concerns in doing the race is from an economical or environmental standpoint. Economics, fine, we can write grants. From an educational standpoint, yes, but really from an environmental standpoint. Because, you know, yes, if you use latex balloons, they will biodegrade eventually. If they land in the ocean, hopefully they don't get eaten by wildlife. But for the Mylars, they don't biodegrade quite the same rate, if at all. So that was one thing that I loved about doing our race, was that we had literally thousands of students tracking 4 individual balloons. So we had people from around the world that were going around it. And so while it's super exciting to be able to launch your own balloon, I get concerned, and I have some pilots that will contact me going, so you're sending how many balloons out into my jet stream at the same time? Thank you very much. Have a good day. So my goal is to try to team up people to try to get them to do their ballooning together, just so then that way we have less of an economical standpoint or environmental. Sorry, there's a lot of long E words I've discovered. From less of an environmental standpoint, that we still will have the sky trackers, we'll still have the balloons, we're still going through everything, but we don't have as many pieces of very thin metal and plastic floating through our atmosphere. Let's see, do I have anybody else have any questions, whether through chat or in audio? Okay, I'm seeing here in New York, our party store has party gas and high lift gas. Is worth asking if they have high lift, which is probably a higher percentage of helium. Yeah, that's definitely. I think a lot of it just depends on where you're at, where you're located, what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. A lot of times, the parties, we don't know what is going to be available. So we do what we can. Did the one fly lower in the jet stream? Yes. That flew about, I think, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, something like that, a little bit lower. So one of our theories is that in Nevada, since both of our balloons were at about the same spot at nightfall, there was a big storm that was in that area at night. So what we're thinking is that my balloon nailed the storm and the lower balloon actually went underneath it. We don't know if that happened, you know, because obviously we will never know for sure. But the fact that they were at the same location, there was a storm, that one kept on going and mine was never heard from again, makes us think that it actually skirted underneath that storm just below the jet stream and then popped back up into it.
What's the cost for your trackers? The balloon and the helium, I guess I can work out the cost of the tracker that you're using.
So Bill Brown has his sky trackers for, I believe they're $149 each, $149, and then plus the cost of shipping. He puts my call sign into them. So I had written a grant a couple years ago for 10 sky trackers. And so I had been launching them at semi-decent intervals. And I'd actually changed school districts between launches, between the years. And so I was able to show multiple school districts, so different groups of kids. I used to teach in Manhattan Beach, which is a very, very, very wealthy community, very similar to Beverly Hills. And so they thought it was cool. They liked it. They thought it was fun. And then I moved to a different district that was much more mainstream, had a lot more students that were middle line to almost the poverty line, and they just ate it up sideways. They thought it was phenomenal, and especially for the price, it was great. We also use our sky trackers for when we do our circumnavigations. So we decide what we're going to do with it. So yeah, so and Bill's saying in the chat box, he does include a 36-inch Mylar foil balloon with each sky tracker. And the foil balloons are about $4 each. They're cheap. I have literally a drawer full of extra Mylar balloons in my bedroom. Because part of it is that I bring them in to the students. We don't launch those, but I have sort of tester balloons so that the students can see them, they can play with them, they realize how big 36 inches really is, and they see the similarities to a regular birthday balloon that you can buy at the grocery store. So Bill's also saying Qualitex brand of Mylar foil balloons work best. He would know. He is the master. But yeah, so I have a number of balloons, and he sends little weighted baggies, I guess would be the best way to describe it, to help in figuring out the mass when you're filling the balloons. Right, yeah, there's no NOTAM required because the payload is in the nano and pento class of mass. I have talked with many a pilot that they will send me a sometimes nice, sometimes not nice email saying, hi, I heard that you're sending a lot of debris into the jet stream. Care to explain why? And then I get to say, it's for education. And yes, I do follow FAA regulations. These don't have to be FAA regulated. When I fly my high altitudes, I launch 4 miles from LAX. So yes, I do. I am literally on a first name basis with the LAX control towers. I file my NOTAMs. I call the control towers the day before. I contact TRACON. I send them cookies afterwards because they work with me. So I follow proper protocol, definitely. But yeah, so for these PICOs, you don't need to follow, you don't need to file a NOTAM. But at the same time, I don't feel that it's fair or comfortable to launch 6 or 7 PICOs right in the middle of downtown Los Angeles. If we're in the middle of the Midwest, little different, but because we have so many different airports, so many different things going on in the air right around Los Angeles, and that's assuming we have no celebrities who must be on their helicopters going to the grocery store kind of thing. It gets to be a very busy airways at the time. Good questions. Any other questions? I'm checking the chat, and I'm loving this chat box. I want to just copy and paste all of these to keep these for future reference. Any other questions that anybody may have about launching pico ballooning, wanting to join our race in October? I know one thing that a lot of my educator colleagues are saying is that they want to do it, but you do need a call sign. And for, especially right now, we're trying to figure out distance learning and hybrid classrooms and things like that. They just don't have the brain capacity right now to try to take their ham license, despite it being a technical license. And so one thing that I'm hoping is that if they want to sign up, if they're willing to pay for the tracker, maybe we can team them up with a local ham radio club that can kind of help them out. So, you know, perhaps if you want to put that if you're interested in helping out, helping out an educator who wants to get going, again, feel free to put that in the chat box, send me an email. And if you want to send me an email, that'd probably be easier, so that way we don't fill up the chat box. But so then that way you can fill up the balloon, or you can just say, I want to help you guys out. I'm happy to do whatever you need to do. Because a lot of our educators would love to start doing this. They just can't because they don't have a call sign. And yeah. Any other questions or comments or suggestions? Ooh, thank you to Paul and Jeff that said that you guys will help out locals. That's awesome. Ooh, sweet. If I have problems in LA airspace, yeah, it's been fun. I launched 2 from Manhattan Beach, launched 1 from Lake Elsinore, and yeah, right now I'm out in Castaic that we're gonna be launching. So we're gonna go right over the mountains and hopefully recover sort of near Palmdale-ish early this afternoon. So actually just letting you guys know, we were on the phone this morning with Spot Trace, and they're having issues with their entire national server. As in, we called them saying, okay, why are we not uploading? Why is it not showing up on the map? They went, yeah, we discovered there's a problem. We're working on it. So for those of you who are using Spot Trace tomorrow, check on that, double check it, triple check it. They are aware, but you may not be right until you're ready to launch. And so that's one of our issues that we're doing. Oh, sweet. If it turns to the north, Tim, we will be contacting you. So we may have you go out there to help us retrieve. Any other questions?
Joanne, I use the Spot Trace as a backup tracker on my large latex flights, and they were selling them for like $50 a piece. I still have one new in the box here. But the Trace, it works pretty well, but I found that it helps if you shake it up right before liftoff, because it likes to, it has an accelerometer in it that detects movement. And sometimes if launches go smoothly, it may not be enough to activate it. So I would recommend you shake the Trace up before you launch it. Then
Definitely.
And also there, when you configure it, you can configure it for 2.5-minute updates if you subscribe to that service, provided of course they get it fixed in time. And you also have an option when you configure it to have it do a 24-hour every day update, which is critical. Once it lands, it'll tell you where it is every 24 hours. I actually had one sitting here on my workbench for a year just to see how long the batteries would last. And it lasted just slightly more than a year, and it updated every day. It would send a position report, and along with if the battery is getting low, it would have a message that said that. But it's a really nice, fairly lightweight and inexpensive unit. The service, I think it's $99 for the year's service, or you can do. They
just now really increased. It's now more like $400.
$400?
Because they set up a new mapping service. And right now it's that mapping service that is causing the delay. So right now there is no Spot Trace available because they're having a mapping issue. And so none of the Spot Tracers are connecting to satellites anywhere. Yes, we spent an hour on customer service with them. They said, yeah, there's this problem. We're working on it. We're going to try to fix it, but it's a full country outage right now. So, perfect timing. I think they heard that we were doing a bunch of HABs and wanted to make sure that their name was in the show. So.
Yeah. What did they give you a estimated time of their?
They said we're working on it.
Ah,
So, we have APRS. We have, I'm a NASA geek, so we do redundancy. So we have, we're going to do the best we can and really hope that our calculations are right in HabHub. And once it starts, once the altitude goes down, start recalculating, and we'll just have to see what happens.
wow. Well, good
So, yeah,
luck with that.
Thank you. Stay tuned.
How many trackers do you have on today's flight?
Pardon? Say it again.
How many trackers do you have on today's flight? The APRS
We
tracker?
normally have 2 trackers. Right now we have a APRS. We have my APRS, and then we actually have another sensor that has APRS capabilities. So with a different call sign. So we may actually end up using both of those just to try to up our odds of recovery. And it could also be that Spot Trace updates itself while it's in the air, and it comes down and it lets us know where it is, and we didn't know where it was before. We just don't know.
Well, if you're able, and you can film, have the video running on your link during your launch, and we can watch your little thumbnail of the video.
We'll see what we can do. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. Well, thank you for listening to my talk. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thank you for presenting. We really appreciate it. This is fantastic stuff. Getting kids involved with ballooning, STEM, just the whole 9 yards here. So very nice talk. Appreciate it.
Thank you.